Welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast. My name is Ian Ray, your host. Today I have Andy Bryant, functional podiatrist based out of Melbourne, Australia. Andy, welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ian. It's a pleasure.
Yes. So I would like to know, and of course my audience to know who you are. What does a functional podiatrist do compared to a regular conventional podiatrist?
So I've been a podiatrist for 25 years. Podiatrists here in Australia are a little different to the States. We're more like a physical therapist and not MDs first and foremost. So we don't do as much surgery, although we can do extra study to do in-depth surgery like the podiatrists do in the States. But most podiatrists here are 90% of the time cutting people's toenails, ingrown toenails, corns, calluses, like real, the nitty-gritty of foot care. And then maybe 10% of the time they're doing some musculoskeletal work like biomechanics and orthotics and footwear stuff. They're all doing footwear stuff. And so for the first 17 years of my career, I had a mix of those two things. And then through my own experience of my own feet getting stronger, I thought I should be helping people rehabilitate their feet rather than support them. And this is where a functional podiatrist or a natural podiatrist is very different to standard podiatry. Like, we're looking at trying to get someone back to the way their foot is designed to function rather than adding support and shoes and things like that. So it's actually taking things away. And so, over the last 8 years, I've just built up that practice. I still have a couple of clients that I look after their toenails and corns, and they benefit greatly from the approach that I have as well, because footwear is a big problem for most people that can't reach their feet or have corns, calluses, ingrown toenails. But the work that I most enjoy is helping people on their journey to have what we call foot freedom, which is where they don't have to think about their feet if they want to do an activity. They can just, throw on any shoe and their feet will not be a limiting factor in the activity they might want to do. So that's what I do in the clinic. And then I also work with the Foot Collective, providing education to other professionals and to the greater space.
And I think you're also a host, correct, for the Foot Collective podcast?
Yeah, I am. Recently, I made the host for the Restore to Explore podcast. I'd been a semi-regular guest on there, and now I'm a host as well. Yeah,
That's awesome.
which is cool. Yeah.
How did you get working with the Foot Collective? When did that happen? What year was that?
Yeah, so when I started looking into natural foot health, Nick St. Louis is like the founder of the Foot Collective. Had an Instagram page called the Foot Collective since 2015, and I started looking into it around 2017. And so I started following that. And then he was doing a world tour of this workshop that he used to do. And when he said he was coming to Australia, I said, I'd love you to come to Melbourne and I could organize the gym that I go to be the host. And so I did that. So I met Nick then in 2018, and Jim, who also runs the Foot Collective now, was a physical therapist in Brisbane. He was there following Nick around, learning the ropes, And so I remember asking Nick that day, how do you, because my practice was so traditional. And so I didn't know how I went about structuring a consultation even, let alone like follow-ups, or how do I do this? So I remember very clearly asking him that. And now I think that's what I teach people, how to do that. So I feel like it's come full circle. And so then, we were in and out of each other's spheres for a while, for many years. I would go to their workshops, I'd help them with their workshops, but not really actually officially involved until there's a Barefoot Shoe Expo that Anya runs. The first big one that she ran was not last May, the May before. And so they invited me to go to that with them to help them. And that was exciting. And the plane and the trip they live 2 hours flight away from me in Brisbane. And so I went up there to catch the plane to the US, and the flight was delayed. So I had to go to their head office. And so the head office is this big space. And then at the back, they've got like an office where there's no chairs that are sitting on the floor or standing at desks. And like Jim's best mates there, and Max, the third part of TFC, his brothers are there, brothers' mates, and there's like 8 guys working there, and some guys and girls working there. And I was like, wow, this is real. Like, this is actually happening. They've actually putting their money where their mouth is. They're actually committing to this process, and it's a real thing. So I really felt like that missed flight, or that delayed flight, was a good thing, because I could see that it was the real deal, and that we I then invested my time into the Foot Collective as well, helping them. And so it's become more official. And so that's the story of me and the Foot Collective. And I really enjoy it. That's my favorite part of my work, hanging out with those guys. But they are 2-hour flight away. And
Yeah.
Nick's probably a 20-hour flight away. So yeah.
Okay. Nick is based in what, Canada?
Yeah, in Canada. Yeah,
Yeah.
in Ottawa,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I myself kind of got started into barefoot shoes, barefoot health about 2 years ago, working out of a physiotherapist's office, and I grew up with a lot of foot pain as far as ankle mobility, knee pain. My foot sucked, and I think it's one of those things. Growing up with playing sports, you just don't you aren't taught about how to work on mobility and flexibility of the foot, how to take care of it, because the athletic trainer, they just tape you up, ice you. If you get injured, they're just going to put you through some, regular protocol rehab. I guess that's one thing that I'm curious to know, on your perspective, where do you think, injury prevention, especially for youth athletes nowadays, are they being taught that? Or do you think there should be a more of a, growing trend of people looking at their foot health?
Of course. And I think it starts with kids, because here in Australia, when a baby starts walking as a toddler, they're in a shoe that is meant to be like a barefoot shoe, thin, flat, flexible. And then when they turn 3 or 4, they go, or even earlier, and I think it's even earlier over there, they go into their stiff cushioned shoes. And so if they never change their shoe, if they were always in that baby shoe, then I think we would have stronger feet, and the feet wouldn't be such a part of the equation when it comes to injuries. And so up to the age of like 12 or 13, I think it's easy to change someone into a barefoot shoe because they're so adaptable. And so it just makes sense. And then they're ticking the box for foot health by wearing that shoe every day. And I think then it matters less what they're wearing for their sporting time, because it's such a short amount of time. But really, if they can wear their day-to-day shoe as a minimalist or barefoot shoe, it's kind of ticking the box. Then they don't lose it and need to rehab it later, I think. Yeah.
That's another question I have. I think most people who probably are searching online, barefoot shoes, minimalist shoe, natural footwear. I mean, those three are like all interchangeable. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I do move around between them, because some people like to hear it: barefoot shoe, minimal shoe, natural footwear. They're all interchangeable. At TFC, we call the 5 Fs. They should be foot shaped. That's a non-negotiable. They should be fixed. That's a non-negotiable. So you shouldn't have to claw it on. They should be flexible. That's negotiable. They should be flat. That's negotiable as well, depending on where you're on your journey. And you should be able to feel the ground. So the 5 Fs. And that's also negotiable. But the two non-negotiables are wide, like foot shaped, and fixed. And then the other ones, whatever you add to a shoe, you are taking away something from natural foot function. So if you're adding a heel, that's taking away from natural foot function. Or if you're adding a lot of cushioning, that takes away from natural foot function. But you have to meet people where they're at. And so they might need a heel, or need some cushioning, or some stiffness in the shoe. Yeah.
Sure. And I guess that's another thing, because I have clients, people coming in my practice, they aren't aware of what barefoot natural footwear is. And my first thing when I'm working with them is looking at their feet, the footwear, and showing them how that shoe is kind of conforming their toes to the way that it is. Help us paint the picture when we are, let's say as parents, what are some of the things that we can do to help people, especially with flat feet? I think that seems to be a lot of concern of, like, my child has flat feet, or I have flat feet, so I can't wear barefoot shoes. That's a myth. Is that a myth, or is that more of a...
For sure. And kids are meant to have a flat foot until they're about 5 or 6. Like a toddler first walking has a big fatty pad in their arch, and their feet are splayed wide because their head is so big compared to the rest of their body. They need a wider base of gait and a wider support, and they want as much ground contact as possible so they can feel the ground. And so they're meant to have a flat arch then. And so many people bring their like toddlers in, they've got flat feet. That's kind of the way they're meant to be. And then, if you think of a baby, when it comes out of the womb, its hips are externally rotated. And so and then when they start weight bearing, they're internally rotating, and through their junior years, they're internally rotated. So you see the arch is lower, and then through puberty, they start externally rotating again. And then you start seeing this arch. And so arch height rarely matters, but as long as the arch can move. So we don't want to see an arch that stays flat or an arch that stays high. We want to see an arch that can move into flatness and into a higher position. Like arches need to be able to move. It's only when they don't move that I think problems exist or we should do something about it. And traditionally, we've put an arch support in there to try and, well, that doesn't make it move. That just moves it into a different position. So what I get people to do is exercises that get their arches moving and then add strength to that mobility. And a barefoot shoe meets people there because it lets their arches move compared to stiff shoes, and it adds strength to their feet and calves and legs because they have to do some work. So, but it's all on a scale. You can't just sometimes throw someone into that. But with kids, you usually can because they're so adaptable.
Yeah. Okay. So barefoot shoes, that's another topic as far as like, are they good for me? Are they not? If I wear, especially like, let's say, geriatric ages, my mom recently, I helped her, I've been educating her about the importance of barefoot shoes, even at 72 years old, so shout out to you, Mom. Are they safe as well to wear barefoot shoes, people who are in the geriatric ages?
Yeah. So my biggest clientele and TFC's biggest clientele as well would be the 50 to 70-year-old women. I wouldn't say geriatric. That would not be the right word. But
Okay, sorry.
that in that age group, things have to be done a little slower than if you're 12 years of age, obviously, or if you're 20. But then you're probably not asking as much of your feet either in a lot of situations. But that's also when you're more likely to have injuries. So it's really on a case by case scenario. I've had 90-year-olds that go into less shoe and do it very well without any problems. So yeah, no issues. Yeah, if
How
you're
about,
just sensible about it. Yeah.
and then as far as like orthotics, that another myth, is that something by case, or do most people need it? Because like I have a 14-year-old client coming in. He has flat feet. He's talking about knee pain. His dad is, he has structural imbalances in his skeletal system right now, but he's an athlete, and his dad is always concerned about, oh man, like I think we need to probably take him to a podiatrist, get some orthotics. But then I told him, wait, hold on, before you even do that, he's too young. It's 14-year-olds should not have orthotics, especially if he's active and growing. But
Yeah,
what's the case by case?
it is definitely case by case. And so even in that language of having flat feet, like he probably just has low arches and can probably change the shape of his arch. If you see him do a calf raise, his arch can change shape. And so then he's probably not strong enough to create that change. And then, so you add on strength, or his foot is stiff in that lower arch position. And so it can't get out of that. So you add in some mobility. And so putting an orthotic in that situation, I don't think it's warranted until you've tried mobility and strength and all these different things. Even just having a space to use your big toe. Your big toe is one of the biggest powerful things that changes arch height. So we should be really making sure that happens. And so orthotics can be used. Like I saw someone this week, a 12-year-old girl who has knee pain when she's playing netball and soccer. And she's already using orthotics, but not doing any rehab. So we added all this rehab and we left the orthotic in place because it does help her pain. And so the research says if there's no pain and a low arch, we shouldn't do anything. Like this idea of skeletal imbalance is not really a thing. I think it's just bodies growing and changing and needing to expose to different movements. There shouldn't be this perfect posture or perfect structure. And so anyway, we left the orthotic in place. We're doing exercises. Things are on the up, Yeah.
No, thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
That's great for me because, like I said, I'm treating and working with a lot of youth athletes. I think that's probably some of the common questions I'm going to have to get from most people.
Yeah, for sure. And parents are always worried about that. And so it's our job to say, hey, let's try this first. Let's do this. Let's expose the body and foot to different ranges of motion, especially with athletes become very single-minded and very focused on doing one activity. And so the big part of the rehab for her that I added was balancing on the soulmate, which is this cork thing that the cork balance beam that that TFC come up with, because immediately lights up this idea of fun. We went through a balance screen first where you do a minute with your eyes open, foot flat on the floor, single leg, a minute with your eyes closed. She was like nailing it, really good, And then we go onto the forefoot with eyes open. Okay. And then forefoot, eyes closed. That's like, this is an athletic position. She's an athletic person. So we really need to be able to own those positions. So do a screening. So we can test that screening every week from now on, like see how your balance is going. Because I think when your balance gets better, you're going to balance is such a critical thing. You're using your hips, you're using your whole body is really helping you. And so then there's not such a focus on the shape of the foot if you get your whole body working well. And so I think as her balance gets better, she's going to get better hip strength to control what her foot's doing. And so we got her on the Soulmate, which it lights up. It's like, oh, this is fun. And if rehab can be fun, then it's more likely to be done. She's got siblings, so they're going to be competing, doing a lot of games. Play is a very powerful way to teach something because our systems are designed to play for learning. And so you make it rehab playful, especially for kids, but even for adults. And then it's more likely to be done. And then it's more likely to have a quicker effect as well. So we got that in place. The orthotic is, there as it's not like stiff and hard. It's quite a soft orthotic that is just almost reminding in a proprioceptive way for the muscles in the foot to do some work to help change that shape. She's got this foot that is lower arched and doesn't like to change shape so much. So we're doing some mobility work, some play balance-based stuff, and use the orthotic for sport and less so for day-to-day activities. And then changing shoes so we can really engage that big toe because that's going to help change the arch as well. Yeah. So that's kind of like that was a great example this week that happened.
Yeah. So with foot pain, what are some of the common foot pains or injuries that people are coming into your practice or that you're constantly working with throughout the years?
Yeah.
That you've seen?
So bunions are the number one thing that I deal with these days. And a bunion is primarily the big toe, someone with a wide foot, and then a conventional shoe does this. And that's what a bunion is right there. And there are other reasons for a bunion. Having a wide first, second metatarsal angle is a reason for having a bunion. But if we look at unshod populations, there's just as many people with wide first, second metatarsal angles, but they have less bunions because it's conventional shoes that pull the trigger on the genetics of that space. Other injuries, like if people have a lot of lateral ankle sprains, that creates instability on the inside of the foot, and then you're more likely to get a bunion. So there are other reasons for it, but that is probably the number one thing I help with, and it's kind of the easiest thing to help with because changing footwear is a game changer for function and pain, and that's the things that we're trying to help with, mostly function and pain. And there's 4 stages of bunions, and doing rehab and changing footwear really helps with those first 2 stages of bunions that you'll actually see a toe straighten over time. But in the later stages, you may see an increase in function and a decrease in pain, but often the big toe is still a bit pushed sideways. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so bunions, and then the other one is plantar fasciitis or plantar heel pain. I see a lot of that, and there are 5 big things that might cause plantar heel pain. Someone who's overweight, like I might bring awareness to that, but I can't do a lot about that. So someone who's overweight, then we're looking at load management. So someone's done too much, they've gone on holiday, walked a long way, or they've done too much too soon. So we can definitely manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 3 things are calf strength, ankle mobility, and foot strength. So those big 5 things are what are underlying plantar heel pain. And so when someone gets plantar heel pain, plantar fasciitis, they go and get orthotics, they get shockwave therapy, they get cortisones, they get dry needling, they get foot mobilizations, they get all these things that aren't really treating the cause. And so the way I go about it is look at their footwear so their foot can move well, is mobile, their ankle's going to be mobile, and their foot's going to get stronger if they're in a shoe that makes their foot do some work. Their foot strength, ankle range of motion, calf strength, and load management. So if you address the cause, then it's less likely to happen again. So it's still not it's not smooth sailing. It's a long-term injury. And I always have a preface when I start with someone with plantar heel pain, like maybe the thing that's going to fix this is just your body healing. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time with musculoskeletal injuries. Natural healing, your body wanting to heal, is probably the thing that is doing most of the work. But if you can make an environment that's more conducive to healing, then maybe it'll happen quicker. And an environment more conducive to healing is less inflammation. So looking at your diet, making sure you're sleeping well, looking after all these big lifestyle factors, they're the load management side of things. And then if there's an insufficiency in the strength around the area that you saw, then let's work on that so that maybe that will stop it coming back again.
Yeah. It's funny because I think
Yeah,
that's
go on.
one of the hardest things for most people is the change of habits, right? Whether if it's the lifestyle or the daily
Yeah,
things.
for sure.
And I'm sure you probably have to follow up and, educate people on that these are small incremental things that have been years that they've been dealing with. So it's going to take, a lot of effort as well. I mean, it's not an overnight change because even myself, like 2 years in, I still have to work on it, as far as my foot splay, my foot strength. I mean, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm proud to where I have been since the change of footwear. I think that's been one of my game changers, just educating myself and learning through experience. So I think that's wonderful that you have that approach and as from the ground up approach, which I also take.
I think it's important for people like us to be a guide, so people are getting to experience it for themselves and learning from that experience rather than, oh, Andy fixed me or Ian fixed me. No, Andy guided me and I was learning along the way. And if this happens again, I'll be able to look after myself because I kind of know what I should be doing, you know? So I think
Mhm.
like my role as a health, that word health care provider is to help someone empower themselves to be more healthy rather than reliant on me. I hate it when people say I need to be fixed. I've been told you're going to fix me. I'm like, hey, I'm tapping out straight away. I'm going to guide you on enabling your body to look after itself better. Like a driving instructor sort of thing. Someone helping
Okay.
someone drive better.
Yes. Therefore, the name TFC Guide. Correct. Yeah,
Yeah. So the
I
guide
got.
program for TFC, yeah, the Foot Collective Guide program. That's you can be a movement or health professional or just anyone. And they do a guide certificate, which is a 2-week, 2-day in-person certificate where you just learn about the history of feet and like how they should be functioning, and then how our bodies should be being looked after in a whole facet of ways, not just the feet. And at the end of that, you can choose if you like to sit like a Q&A exam, and then you have a year to pass cool physical exam of balance, basically, to show proof of work. And I don't think there's ever been anyone that's passed it on the weekend, because it's hard enough that even someone who's very good at balance has to go away and practice and
Mm,
understand what it's like to fail. And it was important that I do it because if you want to run a course for TFC, if you want to be a TFC like leader, someone that runs their courses, you have to have this guide. So it was important that this guide certificate. And so it was important that I did it. And so I worked at it for like 3 months. And my balance is like probably better than most people, but it's not like astronomically amazing. And I worked at it for 3 months, like 10 minutes, maybe 4 times a week. So that's unusual. I'm an athletic person and I don't usually do things that I'm not good at, because that's what you do when you're athletic. You kind of just stick to the things in your own lane. And so I put my video in of me balance doing my flow, this blue belt flow. And
mhm.
I was like, oh yeah, I've done it. I've done it. I was so excited. I even put it on social media. Yeah, I've done it. This is awesome. And then I get this email back saying, sorry, you failed. And so it was like, so I was like, no, I can't believe it. How can I have failed something physical? And so I just went, no, I'm not doing it. I thought, stuff it. No more. Not doing it. And so for 2 weeks, I was like a big check in for my ego. And then I'm like, oh, I really want to do it. So then I just practiced for another 2 weeks and I got it. But this is the lesson, because if you're dealing with in a rehab setting, you're going to have people having ups and downs and really struggling with their rehab. You have to know what that feels like and
Mhm.
know there's going to be setbacks. And so this is the beauty of having to do something physical like this. You're really sorting the wheat from the chaff. People that want an easy answer, and you want to have people there that know what they're doing, and they have to be of a standard that if they're going to be able to run a certificate, not a certificate, one of the programs like a workshop or a play shop or a pro seminar, that they are of a standard. Otherwise, it's embarrassing if they're trying to teach someone that they can't, that when they can't do it themselves. So that is the blue belt flow and the guide certificate. A lot of people do it and the guide certificate for their own knowledge and for their own worth for their own feet. But then a few go on and do this extra certification. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
There was something that popped into my head. I know you were or you are an avid runner and cyclist, correct?
Mm.
You were. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I am. I still ride
Okay.
and run both things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just came home from the gym and I do some yoga and I walk my dogs a lot and I play golf. So I'm a mover. I do a lot. Yeah.
I have a client used to be a track hurdler currently, and he's transitioned to cycling. That's another issue as far as like the footwear with cyclists, because there are brands out there who have barefoot cycling shoes.
Yeah.
But I think that it's the hip pain that most people get because you're in this repetitive movement, and
Yeah.
so to help us understand what, especially running, form, heel striking, all that stuff.
Mm.
Those are two, I think, topics that you and I could probably kind of go over is running with,
Yeah.
how to run properly. And then, of course, too, is like with cycling. I know it's not talking about foot, but it's the footwear that also affects with cycling, So let's first go
Yeah.
over running, gait
Okay.
cycle.
So running. Yeah. My take on running is that, well, if we go back to the big running boom in the 60s, there's a
Hmm.
whole lot of sedentary people sitting at a desk. And it's not dissimilar to the running boom we're going through now. Really, it's not actually dissimilar. A whole lot of people start running because it's so good for your health, and they start getting injured. And so the shoe of the time was like, the athletic shoe of the time was very thin, flexible, flat, but it wasn't wide at the toe. So that, like, your Nikes and your Adidas were like this waffle, like this thin, flexible shoe. And so then people were getting injured, and the shoe companies went to health practitioners and said, what do we do about this? And they said, put a heel raise in and put cushioning on. And so what they did, and Irene Davis has done a lot of research on this, and she says, I've got to get this right, instead of addressing the way people were running, they just accommodated them with shoes, with cushioning and heels. So because people weren't athletic, they were living sedentary lives and then going out and running, they were getting injured. What we should have been doing is looking at the way they moved and
Hmm.
changing that. And then they would have been fine in the shoe that they were in. I'd prefer they were a bit wider, but that's other cultural significance. Anyway, so then what we've seen is this influx of bigger shoes, heeled cushion shoes. And then that's 60s, 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, podiatry is booming because everyone's still getting injured. Like, this didn't fix things. They still got injured. Yeah. And so then they started wearing shoes, like all the shoe companies came out with motion control shoes, like Brooks Beast, Asics, Kayano, 2010s, all these shoes that
Hmm.
had this medial posting to stop pronation, because pronation was terrible. Whereas in the truth, pronation is necessary. It's our shock absorption. It's our bringing our foot to the ground. We need to pronate. And if you look at some of those YouTube videos or reels on Insta of these elite runners running from behind, they are pronating to the maximum, then bouncing out of that, like loading the muscles and then using that spring to bounce out of it. So we went through that anti-pronation phase, big orthotics, control, control, control. And then that brought us to that was when I was finishing my degree around 2000. I was given orthotics for tibial shin pain, because I was overtraining, not pain. I had stress fractures in my tibia. Overtraining, not doing any strength training, probably not sleeping and eating well. In retrospect, I didn't know this at the time.
Hmm.
And overtraining. No one looked at the way I ran or did strength training or anything like this. And then go through the early 2000s, big orthotics still start with, and then there was the first movement with the book called Born to Run by Daniel Lieberman of barefootedness. Like, this is the 5 fingers. And so they had this big boom, like, it's going to fix your running, all this type of stuff. And it was like a bit too much. And people started running 50 miles a week or 30 miles a week in their big shoes, and then 30 miles a week in their 5 fingers, and they got injured. And so that kind of was a bit not great. I remember being a podiatrist through that time and saying, oh, you can't do that. Like, we can't strengthen the foot muscles. They're like eye muscles. We can't do it. Yet my wife's an orthoptist. She trains people to train their eyes. So you can actually train the eyes as well as the foot muscles. But we were told at uni, you can't train the foot muscles. You just need to support them. Anyway, so now we've gone to these massive shoes that pretty much, and this is making an Instagram post about this, Oscar Pistorius. Remember Oscar Pistorius?
Yes,
He's
the
like this
South
guy
African.
that does, yeah, he's this guy that has, instead of legs, because of, I think he was born this way, he has calves and feet made out of carbon when he's running.
Yeah.
And he can keep up with, like, he's making Olympics. That's how good he is.
Hmm.
And so now, and so then we've seen the shoe companies go, hey, this is an idea. I don't know if they actually did that, but let's make the foot more efficient. What does the foot do? It shock absorbs and it springs. And so let's let's put a carbon plate and a big cushion in the shoe, and then the foot doesn't have to do it. And when the foot doesn't have to do it, there's a decreased energy used and you can go faster. This is the truth. This is what happens. But the foot does so much more than just shock absorb and spring. It senses, it does so many things. There's so much going on for the foot. So anyway, that's like the history of running. We're now in this phase where we're using the biggest shoes ever. And they've actually put a legal limit on the shoes, 4 centimeters. And so, and if you've got a 5 centimeter one and you're in a world championship, you'll get struck off. So they've actually put a legal limit, but 4 centimeters is still a lot of cushion and a carbon plate in there as well. So anyway, what we should have done back then is taught people to run like the skill that it is. And I think children are innately born with that skill, and then they de-learn it from wearing a heeled cushion shoe that lets them overstride. And so I don't have a problem with someone heel striking, midfoot striking, or forefoot striking. The devil is the overstride. That's putting your foot out in front of you too far. And when you do that, it acts as a braking force. Often is a heel strike. Like, it's harder to overstride with a forefoot strike, but I've seen it done. People do it. And that's not great either. So less about the way the foot lands, like where the foot lands, but more about where it lands in relation to your body. You want it closer to under your body, because then it's less of a braking force and there's more of a momentum and there's more action behind you, which is engaging all those big muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, and things like this. And so the good running coaches I think the good running coaches don't teach foot strike position. They teach body position, like postural position of the body when you're running. And then the foot strike looks after itself, because the foot is pretty much a conduit between your environment and your body moving well. And so if your body moves well, if you're going uphill, you might be more on your toes than if you're going downhill. Or if you're going on a side hill, then one foot's going to be pronating more and the other foot's going to be supinating more. Like, the environment is telling your foot what to do, and your body moving well is telling your foot what to do. And I like that space for thinking about running. And so there's people that teach running as a skill, and I like the ones that focus on the whole body moving rather than how the foot strikes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard that story about the carbon steel from Jeff from Nature Athletics. Actually, he was mentioning to me about that when I had him on the podcast, Jeff Grau. And so, like, yeah, just the whole evolution of footwear and how it's changed to what you're mentioning about. Yeah, like that's something I never learned until recently. So it's intriguing.
Yeah, it is pretty intriguing. Yeah, it's only pretty recent. It's only the last 60 years that we've, got bigger and bigger shoes. Let's talk about cycling now. So I've got a pair of strong feet athletics. They're called the Leviathan, because they are a Leviathan. They're a huge shoe. And you look down as a cyclist, you're usually looking down and seeing this little shoe, because cycling shoes are like, I think it's the Italian background of cycling, the European. They're very fine and they're beautiful shoes, and they've got like this nice taper. And you're like, why is that? Why do they have this taper? And why is the foot so squashed? And so many people have foot issues with cycling, especially hot foot, like neuromas and bunions and this type of stuff. So, and cycling is an unnatural human movement. So your foot is kind of along for the ride. It shouldn't actually move much at all in cycling, because if it's pronating and supinating, that's wasted energy. It just needs to get the power of your leg into the pedal. And so if there's this going on, like your foot's pronating and supinating within the shoe, that's basically wasted energy, which is why cycling shoes are so stiff from heel to toe. They don't move at all. And that's how they should be. It's a better for transfer of energy from the big muscles further up. And also, like in gait, in walking, running, we see internal and external rotation. And in cycling, it's more like a piston. So it's not a natural, like riding a bike is not what a human was evolved to do. And so we have to take that into the equation when we're dealing with a foot, because maybe the foot doesn't need to splay so much, or maybe it doesn't need to be squished. Maybe it needs to be in between there. Like which position is the most powerful position for the foot? And maybe and I've talked to the guys that make wide shoes, and I'm wearing the wide shoes because they're so comfortable, like unbelievably comfortable. But the most powerful position for a foot is when its toes are squashed, because that's when the muscles are contracted and the foot is stiff. So we really want the foot to be stiff, but it needs to be for it to be stiff, it needs to be able to lengthen and then shrink. It needs to be able to do that movement of opening the toes and closing the toes. Like, we're also fascinated with toe splay, but the powerful position of a foot is a squashed position. but that power comes from the fact that you were splayed and then your muscles shortened and then pushed you off. And so I don't know how it is with cycling, like where it's going to end up. The Strong Feet Athletic also, Leviathan is very flat. It's dead flat. And nearly all cycling shoes have a bit of a toe spring. And I definitely had to put my saddle down because it really made me engage my glutes more, which I found like it was uncomfortable because I was so used to riding with the other shoes. It worked out immediately that I'd been putting up with pain as soon as I put my barefoot, my other cycling shoes on. And I was in a pair of Bont, Bont. They're like the widest shoe you can get, but not custom Bonts. And they were causing my foot pain as soon as I put them on. And I didn't realize until I put these other ones on and my foot doesn't hurt. I still don't think I'm going as fast as I was in my Bonts. And so I feel like there's some happy medium with space, but not too much, but no constriction. And it's hard to do because they're trying to make a shoe for everyone. So they've got to make it wide enough for everyone, but then that isn't going to suit everyone. It's a heavy shoe as well. So cyclists are all about weight. To go up a hill fast, you need to be as light as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're adding half a kilo, well, it's not half a kilo. Compared to a normal shoe, it's about a quarter of a kilo. So it's not much, but that will get to people. There are a few other brands as well that have properly wide shoes, and you can get Bond make a custom shoe. If I had endless money, I would just get them all and test them all. But I'm enjoying riding in the Strong Feet Athletic because my feet don't hurt, But I just feel like I don't have as much power when I push on the pedals. So I'm looking. I wonder what that means. Maybe I need to. Yeah. Anyway, I'm working on it. Yeah, which is like goes back to, like we are our own experiment. Like we're just practicing and experiencing these things in a field that's kind of unknown. So yeah, that's cool.
Love that. I love that, you have all these experiences to share, to pass along to me and to our audience, because the fact that, most people are probably have experienced or living the same kind of lifestyle, as far as the activities and what they're going through. So it's been very beneficial for me learning about this. One thing I want to learn about with the functional podiatry too is, let's say like nerve pain, because like plantar fasciitis, I work with fascia. So as a fascia stretch therapist, the fascia covers the whole entire body, right? From the bottom up. What's your take on fascia and how that translates with the body? Do you know much about it, or?
I don't know a lot about it, but I also think, when I'm say I'm teaching someone how to do a calf raise properly and strengthening their calf, that's what the calf raise is for. The muscles, when you're doing that, aren't just doing the work. The bones aren't just doing the joints aren't just, like, every part of that movement is getting some benefit from that movement and getting stronger. And so I don't specifically train the fascia, and I'm not pretending to strengthen the fascia in a case of plantar fasciitis. If anything, I'm trying to strengthen the muscles around it so the fascia doesn't have to do so much work, because at the moment it's tapping out because it got sore,
Mm-hmm.
And so similarly, when say I've just been at the gym tonight with my son and I'm squatting, I'm thinking, if I'm thinking about fascia or muscles or bones or joints or my nervous system, they're all benefiting from me doing a heavy squat. I don't feel like I need to isolate the fascia or the muscle or the bone or the nervous system. My movement is doing that. If I'm going for a run, I'm not thinking about using my fascial slings or my quads or my hamstrings or my feet. I'm just running, and I think they're all benefiting from those things. So that's kind of the way I look at it, which may be a bit reductive, but I sometimes if I go too deep on something, my brain's going to explode. And so at this stage, I'm keeping it like broad like that. Yeah.
Sure. No, that's cool. I was just curious because, fascia is this buzzword that's been going around. That's what I do, is like I help people understand fascia and everything, the whole body. So it's just one of my takes. I always ask my guests if they know
Yeah.
much about fascia. I guess another thing too with barefoot shoes, let's say, people who are getting into barefoot shoes, what are some great exercises so that they can transition from conventional shoes to barefoot shoes? Can you give us some tips, tools that you use personally or in your practice?
In my practice, everyone would go away with some form of calf raise, because it's like even those with a stiffer foot that are getting better at getting off, that are better off at getting off the ground, are not always doing it in the right way. They're kind of maybe cheating it or pushing off on the outside rather than through the big toe. So some form of calf raise that's either working on mobility or strength or both, or gait, like as in it's a precursor to them trying to change their gait because we're trying to get them to use their big toe, and then balance, because balance ties it all together. And so you might have expected that I'd say I'd get people to do towel crunches or big toe push downs or some intricate exercise. The most current research shows that the little intricate exercises aren't that important in most cases. I argue against that in some cases when someone can't get their intrinsics to work, and you can feel whether they're working when they're balancing or whether they're doing calf raise, then I'm definitely going to get them to do those little exercises. But for most people, especially those that aren't injured, getting those big movements of a strong push off, a powerful push off, an effective and efficient push off in their gait, and a balance that is using their whole body, they're two of the big things that I do. And I just the thought just came to me that one is the push off, that's the calf raise. Just before that in gait is this single leg balance, especially in running, but to some extent in walking. And before that is landing. And so if there's a third exercise I get people to do, it's to get their arch to experience movement upon landing. And so we want the arch to be able to flatten and then change shape and come up again. Because then we're ticking every box in the gait, the landing, the balance, and the push off. And so a lot of my rehab is based around that. Like I'll watch someone walk, see where the focus needs to be, either whether it be the landing bit, the balance bit, or the push off, but then also throw in the other bits as well. Yeah. So it's not a specific exercise. It's like work out what you're better at and not so good at, and work on the thing that you're not so good at, because that's probably where you're going to get trouble.
So to close off with this podcast, I guess my biggest takeaway for myself, hopefully for the audience, is this is the transition with barefoot shoes, or even just taking care of your feet. People do have to look at it where it's a whole body perspective, and not only if it's for the younger or for the older generation, but it's meant for everyone. Because I guess there was a time when I first got into barefoot shoes, is that our hands, I look at the feet as like my hands. Like without the thumb or without the big toe, it's like not having a thumb. It's really hard to do things without a thumb, or it's vice versa with the big toe. Another thing is like we're mentioning about foot splay, and like how when you're a child, you have these beautiful foot that's in its natural state, but once we become older, or the type of conventional footwear, it shapes to the environment. And so same thing, if you were to put let's say a mitten or glove on for a child, and all the way up till adolescent, they lose all that nerve endings, the feelings. It conforms to that, so that it becomes weak. And it's the same thing with our foot muscles, right? If we were to wear these socks, shoes, you're losing all the senses, you're losing all the muscles that should be used if you were to work on it. So it's just some of those things I like to point to my audience, is that the foot is just as important as any part of the body, and it's overlooked because we walk on it, we sit, we run on it, but we don't really take care of it, which is the foundation of the body. Without that, I mean, you start seeing deteriorating and injuries happening, and no wonder there's so many people with knee pain, hip pain, back pain. I think it's the mentality that, like you were mentioning, it's not we're trying to help solve the symptom, but not the problem. And the symptoms can usually trace back down to the foot, hopefully. Yeah. But what's your big takeaway for this?
We've got to stop outsourcing our foot's function. Like when we use an orthotic, when we use a big shoe or a stiff shoe, we're outsourcing its function. And it's totally capable, generally speaking, to do the job on its own if you just give it the chance. And if you haven't given it the chance for a long time, maybe you're going to have to do a little bit of work to build up its ability to do that. But then the benefits flow, because then your foot is working in conjunction with the rest of your body like it should. So yeah, I agree.
All right. So Andy, big thanks to you for joining us today. There's so much insight that I've learned, obviously, for the time that we had. And of course, for those who want to learn more about what you're doing, how can they find you? Where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm easiest found on Instagram, Andy Bryant _podiatrist. I work all over the world, not in the US. Our insurance doesn't cover people in the US, but I do Zoom consults all over the world, and I work with the Foot Collective as well. So I'm often doing some work with them. You'll see me there on some of their educational content.
Well, and it's been a pleasure for me. I hope everyone has also walked away taking away something that they can put into action right away. And of course, if those of you who enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, share it with a friend who needs to hear about this, and leave us a quick review because we're growing and hoping to get more experts like Andy and others onto the show. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks for having me.